What's up, guys? Welcome back to Shifting Lanes. My name is Gregson. This is my 2005 Volvo V70R. We have built this thing and tuned it to over 400 horsepower. And this is my 2011 BMW E90 M3, which has an ESS 625 supercharger on it, pushing 625 horsepower at the crank. Now, what that means is I daily drive two cars that combined make more than 1,000 horsepower. And today, I'm going to drive both of them and tell you which one I like better. So if you're new to the channel, thank you so much for watching, and if you're huge into Volvos, we make a lot of Volvo content, and we have a ton new content on new cars we own, and do a lot of OEM reviews. And we've actually noticed something on this channel. Over 90% of you guys, well, almost 90% of you guys over the last year watch this channel but don't subscribe. So what are you doing? Just go down there and hit the subscribe button. You'll get notified anytime we make a video, and don't forget to hit the bell icon, and you'll get notifications on your phone and through email. And it's the best way to follow us through everything we do, and to stay up to date on everything Shifting Lanes does, from OEM reviews all the way to project cars. Now, first things first, today I'm here in front of my V70R, and I love this car. This is my all-time favorite car I've ever owned. It's pushing 450 horsepower. This thing is really, really special. So let's take a look at the engine, because I want to compare the engines of these two things. They're two very different cars, and then we're gonna hop in and take a drive, and after that, we're gonna talk about the M3 and which one I like better. So before we get on the road, a quick look at the engine. This is an inline 5-cylinder engine, and I explain all these things now because if you're unfamiliar with this channel or this platform, it's a very interesting engine. You can see it's transversely mounted. It has an over-the-engine pipe, which actually comes from the intercooler all the way back down behind and goes to the turbo, and it has a massive intake. And we've basically, with the help of rolling motors up in Connecticut, we've built this thing to be 450 horsepower. Some block shims between the cylinder walls, and it just rips. The thing is great, and it sounds amazing. So what we've done is all the engine build, the intake, we have a different MAF here. It's an RS4 MAF. We also have an intercooler, a huge front mount intercooler from Snob, which is basically all this over the engine piping, which is super dirty. Some upgraded bushings. We also have some suspension work done. It is BC Racing coilovers, so you can see right here. BC Racing coilovers, and it also has some Elevate sway bars. Now we're going to be upgrading a lot more in this car very soon. So what I'd like to do is go inside and talk about what it's like to daily drive this thing, because it's a very interesting car. So we've stepped inside, and before we even start the car up, there is one thing I want to talk about really quick before we set off. Is the daily driver aspect is you have to sort of like the interior of a car. The outside sort of draws you in, the interior is where you live. Now, this car, I believe, is one of the best looking wagons ever made. It is beautiful. I love the way this thing is spec'd in the magic blue with the Atacama interior. I've done a few things here and there, and if you're not familiar with this channel, this is why I'm saying this, because you may not know this car. So if you are new to the channel, like I said, welcome, and I hope you really like this car, because it is my all-time favorite car. The wagon itself, the design, I love it. I think it's just beautiful, and that continues into the interior, where you get these beautiful blue gauges that sort of match the aesthetic of the car. You get one of the most iconic things in any Volvo that's ever been made, and that is this manual transmission. This is the M66 manual transmission with the Spaceball, because who designs a manual transmission to look like this? Only Volvo. I love it. I think it's quirky and fun and cool looking, and it's a pretty decent transmission as a manual, and I'm going to talk about that as I drive. So let's get on the road and see if I can translate a little bit of that to you guys through video. Oh yeah, it also sounds like this. Now this thing sounds epic. You don't get a more interesting sound than an inline 5-cylinder. I don't think anywhere in the car world does a more interesting sound. Now you get better sounds. I mean, a naturally aspirated V12 Ferrari with, say a Larini exhaust on it. I mean, if you don't like that, or you think that sounds weird, there's something wrong with you if you're a car enthusiast. This one, it's very unique, and it has that sort of baby V10 sound to it, and that's why I love this car as a daily driver. For number one, I've learned through owning this car and the M3, even in the short time we've owned the M3, Both of these cars have taught me that I'd rather have something interesting and sounding good than something that's way too fast. Fast doesn't necessarily mean better, especially in a daily driver sense. So this car, let's talk about this car and what it's like to daily drive as it sits. This car, as I said, is sitting on BC Racing coilovers. It's sitting on some sway bars, so from Elevate, so it also has less body roll, and that definitely translates into the ride quality. Like I said just a few seconds ago, we are on a bumpy road, and you definitely can feel it. This thing has been turned into an enthusiast's machine. The stock ones of these, they are very docile, and on back roads, you know, you're still going to feel bumps, but you have your comfort, sport, and advanced modes, and you can throw in comfort and the active suspension, which was pretty revolutionary for its time, called 4C. You know, it was pretty good, and it did its job well, and it still is a pretty decent suspension today. I think the coilover suspension is actually better for ride quality, but the way this thing is lowered with the larger 18-inch wheels and a lower profile tire, it definitely is a harsher ride than you would think. Now, as far as speed is concerned, I mean, the way this thing is tuned and the way this thing pulls with the turbo and everything that's involved with what Ben McNally and the guys up at Rolling Motors did to this car. We have a bigger turbo, we have a ported head, the head was refinished, the intercooler, the intake, the MAF, the bigger injectors, everything that was done to this car makes it just feel like an absolute animal, especially on these back roads. It just flies, and it's just so much fun to drive, and I really, it's hard to sort of convey on camera, and that's why I've done so many of these talking videos, because I want you guys to really be involved and engaged in how this car drives and feels, and I feel like I've tried to do a good job of that, and I think I've done an okay job of it. So if you're in the market for one of these cars, get one. As this car sits, it's not really that bad to daily drive, to be 100% honest with you. It's just a good experience for me, so I like daily driving it. For the casual enthusiast, it would also be good. Maybe the exhaust is a little too loud. The MPGs on this thing are not great around town. Now it's getting 15, which is down from what it was from stock. And on the highway, it's actually not really that much different. I've actually seen 24 or 25 MPG in this car before. The rest of the daily driver stuff is pretty good. Handling is strong, pull is strong. Oh, that sound is just so good. I love daily driving this thing because even on these back roads, I'm doing 40, 45 miles an hour. I'm not going fast, and it's fun to me because of the noise, because of the turbo spool. You can hear how everything is going on with the turbo. The way this thing handles, it's just super fun, and it's a manual. That's the most important thing here, I think, because you know, manuals, everyone says, oh, manuals are more engaging, and you know, DCTs and paddle shifts don't have a soul. I don't agree with paddle shifter cars not having a soul. I do, however, agree that manuals are more engaging. They just are. It's just a fact of life, guys. If you're an enthusiast and you want a fun experience on a back road, not going crazy fast, a manual is going to win every single time. It just puts this shit-eating grin on your face every time, and that's why I think this is my favorite car of all time. All of those aspects, it just, everything adds up to sort of the perfect driving experience. There are faults with this car, don't get me wrong. There's lots of rattles and shakes, and it's a 15-year-old car. But for a 15-year-old car, this thing performs beautifully, and I love it. So with that being said, let's hop in the M3 and let's talk about that car, because that car is a very different animal to this one. So before we hop in, let's do the same thing we did with the Volvo. We're gonna open the hood, I'll show you the engine, then we're gonna hop in and I will give you my driving impressions, because you want to see the engine, but you really want to hear how this thing sounds and how it drives, right? Right. So here she is, the beautiful BMW 4-liter V8 from the E90 generation M3s. This is the ESS tuning kit. You can see ESS tuning right on there. And this is the massive blower that forces all of the air into the independent throttle bodies. And they actually keep the ITBs in this thing, which is very cool. So this thing is a really clean engine bay. It's actually a really small engine bay. And you can see that this thing is very large for what we're looking at here. And it's funny, a lot of people think that this bulge in the hood is not functional. It is, because these engines, even with the normal plenum, it wouldn't clear the hood. So that's why the bulges in the hood, is because just to fit the V8, which I think is a really cool kind of thing. But this thing is really hooked up. It's got you know, big intercooler system. You can see down here it has massive sort of air intake. Not sure if it's coming out on camera, but you can see a big cone in there, big filter. There's a lot of stuff in here that is done to the engine, bigger injectors and all that, and that's why I wanted to kind of talk about this as a daily, because it's an interesting sort of test case as a very high performance daily. So let's hop inside, let's close the hood, and I will give you my driving impressions. So when we're talking about being a daily driver, you have to talk about usable power, and with this car, there's so much power. It is unbelievable. Compared to the V70R, this thing is just different in every conceivable way. It is way faster, it's way more powerful in daily driver sense. You can get out of any situation with this car. Now, a lot of reviewers and a lot of YouTubers and a lot of people say, you know, power is good, and a lot of consumers say you don't need a sports car, you don't need a ton of power. And I say to those consumers that are watching this video, if you are watching this video, you are wrong, because you do need power in a car to be able to actually move the car. You know, a Nissan Rogue with 170 horsepower or 180 horsepower, or whatever it has these days, is not adequate to move that amount of car around. 200 to 250 is. We want usable power to be able to move your car, get out of situations, and actually move the car that you're driving. This is way too much for this car, back to this thing, because obviously it's a high performance car and a supercharger is slapped to it. But you know, as being an enthusiast, I love that aspect, and knowing that I have that power on tap gives me more confidence on the road to be able to go out and drive appropriately for my driving style and for New Jersey, because it's an awful state to drive in and people are just absolutely terrible. There is a point of way too much power. When I get this thing on track, I will tell you if this thing has way too much power. Now, the whole reason for this video is to talk about this as a daily driver and compare it to the Volvo. As a daily driver, I admit, this car is better in almost every conceivable way to the Volvo, except for one, and I'll get to that at the end. But comfort-wise, this is better. This is sitting on its normal suspension with KW sleeves, and you actually keep the electronic control, the EDC, in this car, so you can stiffen up the suspension. That KW sleeve kit keeps that OEM functionality, which I think is very cool, but it's just better. It's more comfortable. It's a nicer place to be. There's a lot of carbon fiber in here, which I think is very cool, but it's just a nicer car. It's newer. I mean, you look at any car from 2005 and compared to any car from 2011, the 2011 car is likely going to be nicer, odds are. So it's just a better daily driver in that respect. As far as ride quality is concerned, same story. There's big 19-inch wheels on this thing, but again, you know, the Volvo has 18-inch wheels, and it's not that much of a difference as far as like the tire sidewall depth. So this thing has a better suspension on it. This thing is just so much better from a ride quality perspective. From a handling perspective, this thing is light years beyond the Volvo. The Volvo is great. It's flat. It has everything mechanical that it should, and it handles really well. But this thing is just on another level. Being rear-wheel drive, and the Volvo being a front-wheel drive bias, all-wheel drive car, this thing just pushes you through turns beautifully. The biggest question you might have is, can you daily drive a 625 horsepower BMW M3 that seems like a total animal? And the answer is yes, mostly because this thing doesn't have to be an attack-ready machine at all points in time. There is a button down here in the center console that allows you to change the shift points, so it's a little lazier or a little better. There's a power button, which gives you more power. There's a traction control button, which can turn off, which can make it even crazier. There's an EDC button, which can stiffen up the suspension. Point being, with all those things, you don't have to have all those things on. You can just have it as a normal car. So yes, this thing is very dailyable. I'm just cruising on a 45-mile-an-hour road. It's in 7th gear in automatic mode. It's a perfectly fine daily driver. But the one big difference that I mentioned before is it doesn't have a manual transmission, and that is where the Volvo V70R is set apart from this car. This car is fast, it's really fun, it handles great, it's way better in performance than the V70R in every aspect. But which one would I rather drive? And it comes down to the manual. So if I'm taking my cars out for a daily commute, which one would I choose? Well, based on this video, the natural reaction would be the M3 because it's a better daily, it's more comfortable, and it just is, it's a better car than the V70R in almost every way, except maybe for space, but that's the wagon versus sedan debate. But for me, I would take the V70R because of the manual transmission. I have come to learn through this thing that fast is very fun, but fast is very fun for only a limited amount of time. When you're able to row your own and you can change the gears yourself and you can kind of do everything that a car is meant to do, but you're controlling it, especially with the manual, that's what really makes it special. You can row your own in this thing, but I'm comparing this car to my V70R. These cars do come in manuals, and maybe if I got a manual, I'd have a different opinion. But if it's for me, I would choose my V70R every single day of the week to take out on a daily commute, and I mostly do, because this car doesn't get driven that much as of yet, because it's still the winter and we have a bunch more videos to make with it. But the V70R is just, it's just my favorite car of all time, and I love it, and I think it is so much more fun to drive than the M3 because of that glorious manual transmission. So do you agree with me? Leave it in the comments below because I want to hear your opinion. Do you think the M3 is a better car and a better daily driver than the Volvo V70R? I don't know, maybe you're a BMW fan, maybe you're a Volvo fan, but I want to hear it. Leave it in the comments. Which one would you rather daily drive? My V70R or my crazy supercharged M3? And finally, to kind of cap off the video, what is it like to daily drive over 1,000 horsepower worth of two cars? It's pretty easy, to be quite honest. With the Volvo, you're controlling the power yourself. You know, you have the manual to control it however you wish. And this thing's pretty docile if you just throw it into all of its normal modes. So because you have a ton of horsepower doesn't necessarily mean you have to use it all the time. Because you have a ton of horsepower doesn't necessarily mean the car is an absolute animal. If you have a Ferrari or a McLaren, it's a little bit more high strung, but these things are great daily drivers, and I am really happy that I have the opportunity to drive these amazing cars and bring them to you guys on film. And maybe someday I'll have a car that has 1,000 horsepower in one car, and I'll make a video about what it's like to drive that thing. But until then, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, and follow us on all social media at Shifting Lanes, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, anywhere that you guys are on social media. Go follow us. We post a ton of stuff that you won't see here on our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. My name is Gregson, and I will catch you next time. See ya!